I'm Dr. Rebecca Branstetter, and I am here on a very special episode of Coffee Break School Psychology with my good friend Dr. Byron McClure and my new friend Dr. Kelsie Reed. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
You
Hey,
guys have your
Rebecca.
coffee?
I don't know what's happening, what's going on. I have been on this coffee fix lately. Well, I'm talking espressos, I'm talking blind, I'm talking all different roasts. And today, of all days, I don't have my coffee and I'm fiending for it so bad. So as soon as this is over, I'm going to get a coffee. Then we're going to have to Photoshop it in. So.
I love that. All right, let's do that in post. Kelsie, it might be a little late where you are for your
It
coffee.
is, but you know what I do have is the coffee that I had earlier today. I can only do one per day and it has to be in the morning, but it's here in spirit.
I love it. So now that we have the important things behind us, we're also going to talk about some really exciting news that Dr. McClure and Dr. Reed have going for us. So as you know, as a school psychologist, I love when we take ideas and we turn them into action items for our school psychs, for our teachers, for our parents. So with me now is Dr. Byron McClure and Dr. Kelsie Reed, and I would love for you to introduce yourself. We're going to be talking today about 3 strategies for hacking deficit thinking. So let's start out with you, Byron. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So, and as always, thank you so much for having me back, for allowing me to share this platform with you and to be back with the Thrive Hive. And, for those who don't know me, I'm Byron McClure, a school psychologist who tries my best to live a life of thriving, which is why I think Rebecca and I get along so well. I have been a practitioner for a number of years, went on to redesign a high school in Southeast DC, had a SEL company, and then merged with a larger SEL company. And now I'm on a mission, not only to help people thrive, but to help people flourish and to hack deficit thinking with my amazing co-author, Dr. Kelsie Reed. So I'll throw it over to Kelsie.
Thank you so much, Byron. Yes. And thank you, Rebecca, yes, for having us. I know you mentioned we're new friends, and I'm so excited that Byron connected me with you. So yes, Kelsie Reed, school psychologist, and I'm super excited to be here talking about something that I'm very passionate about. I wrote my dissertation on deficit thinking, and I just think it's a really important topic that often goes overlooked in education spaces, but also an area that we can really make a huge impact in. So thank you for having us.
Wonderful. So let's kick off. I know we're going to talk about 3 ways to hack deficit thinking, but can you maybe, Byron, kick us off with what is deficit thinking and how does it relate to being a school psychologist? I know just on my own personal level, one of the jobs of a school psychologist is to identify disabilities. And when we're doing that, we're really looking for what's not going well, what things need to be improved, where are the weaknesses. Tell me a little bit about what deficit thinking is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a nutshell, when you think of different phrases that people hear, you might hear phrases such as low or at risk or lazy or unmotivated. And those are phrases that really capture the essence of deficit thinking, which is a way to view people by just looking at, the worst of people. And unfortunately, in the space of education, really across industries, is viewing the worst in people, is stigmatizing people, is generalizing people. One of the cool things that Kelsie and I did, we actually surveyed a number of educators because, Kelsie and I, we have our perspectives, but we also wanted to get the perspectives of other educators to get their understanding of what deficit thinking is. And when we take my definition, Kelsey's definition, the definition of educators across the board from so many different places, we really understood that deficit thinking is a distorted lens of viewing people, of viewing students, and seeing things in a really murky, cloudy way. It's a way of perceiving people that may or may not necessarily be true, of having faulty perceptions of people, and then generalizing those thoughts across different groups, across different families, across different communities. And then it's this culture of having low expectations on people. So, in a nutshell, deficit thinking is just a pervasive way of viewing people from a lens of what's wrong. And Kelsie and I, we're on a mission to shift that to what's strong.
So your first sort of pro tip for those of the listeners out there is really shifting this lens from, focusing in on people's weaknesses. And think about it, like if you go about your daily life, do you want people being like, okay, Kelsie, here's all the things I'm noticing you're not doing well? Like, it doesn't really seem to breed motivation and connection and excitement for learning if we're only focusing on those. So can you give me just maybe like a practical example of how educators or parents out there can, maybe shift their lens a little bit from what's wrong?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of strategies that we can do really quickly that we don't realize have a really huge impact on the way we think, the way we interact with others, and kind of just the energy in the room. So one simple thing I can think of is reframing our adjectives. So I know you mentioned as psychologists, we're always looking for, what's wrong with people. We're looking for to categorize students based on disabilities, to qualify them for services. But a lot of the words that we use to describe students is just, it's deficit based. And that type of thinking and speaking translates into how we interact with students and how we think about them, and can snowball into those low expectations Byron shared. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I think one that I know we say quite a lot, or that I've heard quite a lot in schools, is defiant. What's a way we can reframe defiant? I would say bold. I would say courageous. It takes a lot of courage to act in ways that we would perceive as defiant. One that I do a lot that's pretty effective, very easy, simple switch. Instead of calling students hyper or hyperactive, energetic. Because that shows, they just need to get their energy out. And it may seem like you're not making a big difference when you flip this thinking in your mind or flip it when you're talking to people, but it really does just kind of set the tone in a different way, where we're viewing these things that are traditionally negative as more strengths. And it also allows us to understand how we can actually make an impact with the student.
I love that. It's sort of rebranding a weakness as a strength, right?
Exactly.
So we're not stubborn, we're persistent and goal-oriented. What are some examples, Byron, that you can think of ways to reframe maybe some of the things that in education we use to describe students? Do you have any other concrete examples?
Oh my goodness. So an example that really just sticks to me, I think maybe because I see it so often when I was a practitioner, is calling kids unmotivated. And when I hear this kid is unmotivated or this kid is lazy, like my mind shifts towards, is there some executive functioning, things to where it's a skill-based, deficit. And one thing that I want to call out, and Kelsie and I, we've been having conversations on, when we're talking about hacking deficit thinking, it's not ignoring that, it's not ignoring that weaknesses might actually be there, or that there might be deficits. Like, we don't want to ignore that. We don't want to just be blind and have this false optimism and be in this like blind world, like la 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 la, everything is great, because you could actually do damage that way. But it's acknowledging it, but also acknowledging the strength simultaneously, and finding that balance. And so acknowledging it and reframing, no, this kid's not unmotivated. Let's look at, is there some executive functioning weaknesses that might be there, and then build those skills up. And then, Rebecca, I know you have an amazing executive functioning course that you had, but does this kid have difficulty initiating, being able to start tasks, being able to finish tasks? And when we can reframe it, then magic can actually start happening.
I love that. And I love that you pointed out that it's not just about like turning a blind eye to things that maybe need further development, but also noticing strengths and using those to compensate for challenges, but then also just, kind of seeing what's behind the music, right? Why is a student, quote, unmotivated? Maybe they have some sort of lagging skill, and I could geek out on executive functioning all day long. There's other videos on that. But I always say that executive functioning weaknesses are like the fatigue symptom. Like, it's a non-specific symptom. If I went to my doctor, I'm like, I have fatigue. What do I have? Anything, right? Like, it could be so many things. And there's so many reasons that kids have executive functioning challenges. And there's so many reasons they might seem unmotivated. And I think it's really great to focus in on what is that skill that we can boost in them to kind of help them with those skills. So sometimes I think instead of saying kids are unmotivated, it's like maybe they enjoy high stimulus tasks. And they really do well on those things. And I've seen a lot of kids, and you probably have in your practice too, Kelsie, where kids with ADHD, they maybe have a hard time with like low interest tasks, but you can see them really focus on high interest tasks. So that's really a strength embedded within what we think of as a weakness.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Another thing that I want to kind of talk about, we've talked about the first two kind of pro tips, first focusing on, and I love this phrase that Byron uses all the time, from what's wrong to what's strong. Reframing adjectives. And now let's talk a little bit about adults. So the adults in the building, it turns out we're also humans, right? Teachers, school psychologists, and a lot of time, and of course my whole, life's work is based on helping, school psychologists and parents and teachers thrive so our kids can thrive. Talk to me a little bit about what you talk about in your book, Hacking Deficit Thinking, about flourishing. And I just love that word. It's fun to say. Everyone say it. Flourishing.
It is. Flourish. Flourish. Watch me flourish. I love it.
Yes.
No, it's super important. And really on this book, we're taking the readers through a journey. And we're introducing the concept of deficit thinking. We're really giving a good history behind some of the practices and some of the ideology behind deficit thinking, how that thinking has shaped tools, practices, and policy that educators use to this day. And then we look at how that impacts students, school communities, their families. And then we move people towards, okay, what are some tangible things that we can do to begin reframing the language and shifting the actual culture of schools and shifting mindsets. And then we take people on a journey into uncharted territory, which I'm super excited about because I don't think we've done it enough in the space of education, which, Rebecca, why I think your thriving platform is so transcendent. And the journey where we're taking people on towards the latter chapters is on this journey of flourishing. And one of the things that we talk about is the work of Dr. Martin Seligman out of UPenn. And he's known to be the founder of positive psychology. And so all the things we're talking about is evidence-based, it's scientific. It's not just this feel-good, warm and fuzzy stuff. And Martin Seligman, he jokes and says, I'm the complete opposite of warm and fuzzy, but I literally wrote the book on authentic happiness, which is hilarious to me. I just envision like this old grumpy guy writing about happiness in his book. But he says it has to be scientific. It has to be scientific. And so he studied, what makes people happy, what makes people, flourish in life. And he's a psychiatrist. He's had his own private practice. And in his practice and his work, he would see people with severe mental illness. And he would treat through therapy. He would treat through drugs, through treatments. And he would always find that the best he could do, as he said, would be to get people back to zero. And what he meant is after we treat illness, after we treat anxiety, after we treat depression, after we treat schizophrenia and all these other disorders, the best people are back to zero. And then what happens? Most people relapse. And so he says that there has to be more. And so he introduces this concept of well-being and this new model to help people move past just this state of zero and then add on to their life so that they could thrive, so that they could flourish, so that they could lead a life that is meaningful, so that when they look back on their life, they could say, hey, I lived a life that is meaningful, that has been impactful, and you could be proud to say that I flourished. So we talk about some of those things. We talk about flourishing inside the chapter. One pro tool that I'll share with the listeners to help you flourish is several activities, but I'll focus on one activity. And at the foundation of this book is understanding your strengths. And so it's naming, knowing, and using your strengths. And I encourage everyone listening to this, you could take a free Enneagram assessment. And Rebecca, we'll link that on our website. We'll get that linked up. But it's a free Enneagram assessment. There's also the Clifton Strength Finders. There's a cost associated with that. But it's an amazing resource that will help people to name your strengths. So whether you take the Clifton Strength Finders, whether you take the Enneagram assessment, whether you take the VIA, which is the Character Strengths Assessment, which is out of the work of Martin Seligman and his team, you can actually name your strengths. And then once you can name your strengths, you have to know them and be able to understand what they are. What is it that brings you joy? How can you use your strengths to bring meaning to your life? Kelsie and I, we both know our strengths. Like Kelsie, she just has to be strategic. Like that has to be one of her strengths. Analytical, like those has to be her strengths. My strengths is ideation, and I dream big. And we both used our strengths, our individual strengths, in a collective way to bring this book, Hacking Deficit Thinking, to the world. And so once we can know our strengths, we have to use them in a way that's meaningful, that's productive, and that could help us lead a life that's flourishing.
There were so many juicy things in there. Like, I just have to recap all of them. And I took copious notes over here. What I love that you said that first off was that, it's not just about the absence of mental illness or depression or anxiety, but it's the presence of wellness. And I think that our field as a whole is shifting from that deficit thinking into what also helps kids thrive, what helps adults around us thrive. And I love that because it isn't just about not being depressed, it's about living a joyful, full life. I also love that, it sort of starts with us. It starts with parents, educators, and school psychologists. And I love the quote by the late Chris Peterson, I believe, who said, "Positive psychology is not a spectator sport." And I think sometimes we can, as school psychologists, hands up, I'm guilty, focus in on other kids' strengths and things like that, and thinking really positive about them and being kind to them, and then neglecting my own well-being from time to time. So I talk about that a lot in the Thriving School Psych Collective. Because when we are thriving, our kids are thriving, and we can be the living lesson plan for the students we work with, showing them how we cope with stress, how we rebound, and how we use our strengths. And then yes to all of those strength-based assessments for the adults around you to flourish. And I'm dying to know, have either of you taken the VIA character survey?
I have. I've taken all of them. I just nerd out on these things.
I need to know, Kelsie and Byron, what are your VIA character strengths? Do you have them handy?
So I don't have
Go ahead.
the VIA handy. I've been on the Clifton Strength Finders for the past 5 years. Before that, that's when I was doing the VIA, and then the Enneagram of late as well. So for the Enneagram, I'm a type 9 and a type 3. No. So a 9 and 3. 3 was my
Really?
dominant one,
2?
achiever.
Yeah, I see
But
that.
not, and 2 was like the third one, but 9, 3, and then 2. And then for the Clifton Strength Finders, it's maximizer, ideation, achiever, relator. Ironic enough, I think because a lot of the redesign work that I was doing, one of the recent ones was strategic. So ironic. I had never been strategic in my life. But working in DC, like that'll make you strategic real quick. But then what normally rotates with strategic is woo. And do you all know what woo is?
No. Like the
First,
Tang
I love the
Blank?
word. No. So flourish is just a cool word to say, but woo is like an amazing word to say. But woo is the ability to woo people, to be persuasive and to get
You
people
do
to
have that
buy
strength,
in.
yes.
You got the woo. I love it. And you know what, though? With
It's the
all
woo.
those strengths you mentioned, your awareness of them, you can imagine as a young child if someone had focused in on the things you weren't good at, right? So we know we can build up our strengths, but if we know that you're good at woo, which now I'm going to use all day long as an adjective, and we know that you're good at ideating, if we were trying to, say, oh no, don't be an ideator, you need to be a strategic person, then it really denies you the opportunity to be you and really flourish. Kelsie, do you have any strengths to share with us?
So I have not taken the VIA. I did take the high five. It was free. That's why I took it, but I can't pull up my results. I don't know where they are, but I do know that last I took the Enneagram that I'm a type 6, which I'm also forgetting what that is. So this is not helpful at all. But I know personally that I'm logical. I know my personal strengths. I think, like Byron said, I'm great at planning, strategizing. If Byron gives me an idea, I can map out all of the steps that need to happen in order to make that idea happen. However, if it was on the opposite end, what was that?
You two are like the dream team.
I know, it really works. Yes.
He ideates and you strategize together.
Yes.
You guys are
and that
magic.
is another thing we talk about in the book is collective strengths. So ways to foster that in the classroom. If we have all of our students, we know what all of their strengths are, we can use them to each contribute to the community in a special and unique way.
I love it. Well, my strength is love of learning. That is what I took the VIA character, and this is really fueling my energy because I love learning new things, and I love what I've learned from you all about hacking deficit thinking, those 3 points from what's wrong to what's strong, rebranding weaknesses as strengths, and knowing your own strengths so that you can flourish as an adult and be the living lesson for your students and the kids that you care about. So let's leave these listeners. We're going to drop all the links of the things that they shared below, but let's get the most important link, which is where do we get this delightful book?
Yes, you can get Hacking Deficit Thinking at hackingdeficitthinking.com.
hackingdeficitthinking.com. We will drop that in the show notes, and you can go there and get all the information you need and figure out where to buy the book. And then, as I understand, you also have a little special gift there, so go hop over there and you can pop in your email and get a little special gift from Byron and Kelsie about hacking deficit thinking. And I just want to thank you both for being on Coffee Break School Psychology. I'm going to give you a hall pass on not bringing your coffee, but next time I definitely want to see coffee in hand for coffee chat. But thank you so much for joining me. And everyone, hop on over to hackingdeficitthinking.com and grab a copy of this wonderful book.